Hey, I'm MellyS The Story Collector, and this is the Courage 1000 Project, the show where we share personal stories of inner courage from all around the world to inspire you to find your own. In today's episode, we're talking with the beautiful Connie Kiss about how to ride the storm and not fight it. Now, a bit about Connie. She was an immigrant daughter, so Connie is no stranger to hard work. She's got lots of perseverance and a very passionate dream about living a prosperous life. She enjoyed a successful profession in education support for over 18 years and then changed career directions, carving a niche for herself in music as a singer, songwriter, and radio producer. So a big change for her. The road to success, however, was not always smooth. Growing up and into early adulthood, she faced challenges that included abuse of different types, but she managed to overcome her troubles, marrying the man of her dreams. 6 years into her music career, at the break of her fourth album, things changed. She was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. During that dark period of treatment, her father suffered a heart attack, then a stroke, and was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. 3 months after his slow, prolonged demise and eventual death, her mother followed suit with a stroke and early dementia. The emotional and physical strain on her family during this time was very intense. But all the while, Connie laboured to keep her music profile moving forward and dealing with her own health issues at the same time. She has survived it all through strong faith and a deep belief in self. And this she shares very, very openly and honestly in the interview. So the first question I always ask is why? Why do you want to share this story with everybody?
Well, it was an interesting question when you actually asked me on paper, because I basically really made me think about what it was that I wanted to, and I guess it always comes back to us or me. And
Yep.
I think I wanted to share the story because I feel that negativity and angst and all of these things, our lack of self-confidence and our self-talk and all this negative stuff, when you go through some real traumas, it's quite toxic to our psyche. So I felt that it was so important for me to also share my story, that there can be good news at the end of that dark tunnel, you know.
So where does your story begin then?
Pardon?
Where does your story begin then?
Well, it starts a long time. Migrant family. So you basically, as a child, my parents worked long hours. I was born in Copenhagen and migrated when I was 2 years old. And during that time too, my parents had to rely on friends and, their extended community. So I guess in my little thing, I had a few little challenges as a child. I was abused sexually by a neighbor, one of these family friends who picked me up from school. And I think that shaped how I saw myself later on in life,
Yeah.
I did face that demon. I'm okay. I'm over all that, and I can actually talk about it. And then, but as a teenager and as a young adult, we're pretty bad as teenagers and young adults. We usually have a self-destruct button regardless. We're full of
It's built in, isn't it?
I know. And it's, so I had incidences where, I was in quite a physically abusive relationship with my boyfriend. I'm pretty sure that it all came back to my own self-esteem, about my worthiness, my sense of worthiness, who I was
in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but I also, I had a degree and I had done psychology as a master, not a master, major. And it was one of those things where I thought, I can't let this get on top of me. I recognized a lot of things. And So, I'm one of those lucky people who are in a toxic relationship where I could see I needed to get out and get away and not repeat that same
Beautiful.
relationship, and so, there was that. But during that time, I also, was would be pretty reckless, but not very kind to myself at all. And but things sort of changed. I did get a haircut and a real job, and that works. That helps a lot. And I used certainly my degree in psychology. I also had a postgrad in teaching, and I worked with children with disabilities. And during that period of time, I got to recognize a lot of things in terms of the value of life and, where we stand in perspective. And I started on this little journey of self-awareness, if you wish, because I was stressed out of my brain, and I was just so uptight about life and things like that. But also during that time, I met a wonderful man, the man who was the diametric opposite to my abuser. And because I knew what I needed and wanted and out of life after that first experience. And so things were great. I had my job and I was doing my yoga and I was, singing in bands, for my release and playing music with the kids, and everything was great. And then I ended up, am I talking too much, or are you supposed to ask questions?
No, keep going. If I need to ask a question, I'll interrupt. I'm loving what you're saying.
So, life was good, and I didn't want to I don't have children. Goes back again. I'm zigzagging a bit. I had as a teenager, I was in a pretty severe car accident. I was hospitalized for 5 weeks, fractured pelvis, and all those things. Flown from it was an outback accident, and I was flown to Sydney by air ambulance, which are a wonderful service, So I went down the path of not having children, but that was okay because I got lots of hugs, and all my nurturing needs were met working with children with disabilities. And so life was pretty good at this stage. As I said, it was pretty demanding. So I did my yoga for a release and all the rest, and had long service leave. And at the time I was still doing music, but not serious music, but music for release. And then, so I had long service leave, and my yoga friends and that yoga teachers came to me and we did recordings, and I ended up doing all the doodle music on the back of their meditation music and things like that. And I thought, oh, I really like this music business. I like the joy of music. And so I had a little shift in career. And midlife, I had been teaching for 18 years. And at 50, I decided I was going to step out of my comfort zone, which was my real job and my haircut and all this, and pursue my passion in music. Well, that's a pretty hard thing when you're 50 and you're playing
in a very competitive industry. Yes.
Yes, and it's all about youth and beauty and all the rest.
It is a very shallow industry on the face of it. Yes.
Yeah. So I basically, decided to, that I was going to face all that, and I had to have an identity in terms of who I was.
Yeah.
And then, I basically became, a songwriter. Not became, I was always a songwriter, but began pursuing my music passion with more fervor. And
you owned that title.
Yes. And I thought, how am I going to do this? Because I thought, I was so self-conscious about being mature aged. And I thought, nobody's going to want to talk to someone my age, And so I went down this path of songwriting. So, because that's a good thing. You can hide behind your songwriting, and you can, send it off. You send your demos off to everyone, and you're not out on the public face. long story short, one of my songs got a lot of interest by quite some big names, and I ended up getting invitations to record because I was the singer on the demo.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And so anyway, so now I was in thick. I was, and I'd gotten a grant from the West Australian Department of Culture and the Arts. And halfway through my long distance recording project, the producer in Nashville died. And so here we go again. It was like one more obstacle. But so I just decided to pursue it with quite some fervor. But the obstacles are there, as you know, because you're 50 years old, you're in a competitive field, and it really is about saying, I'm an example for others not to lose sight of their dreams, or, be an example for others. But that really came to the test. And here's the crux of the story, I guess, because this all leads up to, I had worked really hard, invested in my music. My husband was my rock. He had all the faith in me. So that was great for me to get there. But the crux came when I invested in my fourth album, and it was going to be my breakthrough album because I finally had found my confidence to put my stamp to my music. And so I had finally found, this breakthrough album, and literally a month afterwards, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer.
Whoa.
So there, and at that stage, that was when everything, where all my values and all my beliefs and all my self-worth and all of that was really challenged in terms of who I was, what I had to do to get through it, what life was dishing out to me. And it was like, can I do this? And I really at stages felt I just, couldn't do this anymore. I just couldn't do it. I invested my whole heart and soul, my savings, all of this stuff. And so, not only was the colorectal cancer was stage 3, as I said, and so basically they,
what's stage 3 about? What does that mean?
Stage 3 means it's metastasizing, so it's already in your lymph system.
Okay.
So that means that the next stage 4, tumors are developing in other parts of your body. They're carried, the cells are carried through your lymph system to other parts, and they, wherever they like to plant themselves to create a tumor. So stage 3, it's moving through your system. It's already started to spread.
Yeah.
And so that meant removing the tumor, which meant I don't know how much they took of my colon, but basically taking out my colon, having a bag, having an ileostomy bag, having 6 months worth of chemo every other week, which was like a 3-day thing where you had, you went in, you got your dose of chemo at the hospital, then they sent you home with a bottle, literally hanging off your chest because they had a port. And then there was like, not only that, then you went back the next day, but then I also developed deep vein thrombosis where the port was in my chest. And so then I was having, daily injections for 7 months. And so I'm dealing with all this personal thing and thinking the why me questions, why, and my faith, I've always, despite obstacles that I've had before, I've always looked on the bright side, and things like that. And then during that, my father had a heart attack. Then he had and I just finished, then he had a stroke. And then he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and diabetes, and he was an amputee anyway from a car accident. And it was just,
the world piled everything onto you, didn't it?
Yes, it was literally, and it sort of, was fairly intense because my dear mum, she didn't want to put my father into a home. So the challenges were to not just support dad, but support mum. And, fortunately, I had a sister who was very keen to, support them. So when I was touring, she was there for them. And
But you're really on your music or your career when all that's happening. You're focused on everything else but.
absolutely. So then you've got this whole thing where you've invested all of this energy, all of this money, all of yourself, all of your family. You've made so many financial sacrifices, to pursue your dream, and so you really basically under that pressure to make things work, sort of. So it was a struggle, and so not only was I, instead of moving to where the music was, which I had intentions to do. I got visas to go to the US and everything. That all went on hold. And basically everything went on hold, and it was just treading water to get there. And the challenge is saying this too shall pass, and this too will pass. So like you think there were some days where I just thought this is never going to end.
Yeah.
And then when my dad finally passed, 3 months later, my mum had a stroke, and then it all started again. So
the
it was.
You had a chance to breathe, and by that stage, you're only just getting over the grief, and it hits again.
Well, it wasn't just grief. There was I couldn't even celebrate my own health, as in finishing my chemo. Going through. I didn't sort of mention that I also was legally blind at one stage because the steroids that had been administered actually encouraged the growth of cataracts. And so I had to have surgery for that, but that was minor
in comparison to everything else. Yeah,
but a mere flesh wound. But yes, so it was one of those things where, and then of course it just went on because in the end, to accommodate my mother, we ended up pulling down our bathroom, which was not suitable for a disabled person. And in that doing, because it's an 85-year-old house, it became like an onion. And so we ended up moving out of our house in the middle of all this as well. So it's like, oh my gosh. So that's my story in a nutshell. But I'm smiling now. So I guess that's the
point. Did you get to go back to your music then?
Well, I kept the music. I'm only getting back to my music in with the same fervor that I had originally. I kept my music going. I released 2 more albums, and but it was. I can assure you, it was like stressful, and because it was one of those things. It was like almost obligatory, because otherwise the business of music is very shallow. It's all smoke and mirrors. If you're out of the game for a little while, you're forgotten. You're old news. You have to basically have a presence all the time. I guess one of the good things that happened just before I just released my album in Nashville, and it was during FanFest, and Country Music Radio Nashville were interviewing me, and they basically said they were looking for an Australian broadcaster to do an all-Australian show for them. And they asked me would I be interested, and I'm going, oh no, I'm not, I don't know anything about radio, blah blah blah. And anyway, I contacted the one of the DJs that I did know, because I put a whole lot of names forward, and he had an Australian segment, but he'd left, and so they were looking for someone to replace him. And so basically, he said, no, do it. So I had committed to doing this radio show before I found out that I had cancer. And so that was one of the ways that kept my profile going. But I can assure you, with chemo brain, it was the hardest thing I had ever done, because I couldn't string words together at some stages when I was had the chemo sessions, you know. But I was awake all night because of the steroids, so I guess it worked. You know, I can laugh at it now, I can assure you, but not then. Yeah.
So through all of this, where do you think you were most courageous? Like, where did it present the most for you? Because there's so many different elements to your journey.
I know.
Courage to you would have a very different meaning to maybe somebody else.
It does, you know, because one of the things that I learned, you know, your emotions, like, I can assure you, I might be smiling now, but your emotions are like a roller coaster. They go up, down, and intense, very intense. And one of the, in terms of courage, people would say to me, "Oh, be strong, be strong, be strong," and that to me was one of the things that was a fallacy. And fight this, fight this, fight this. Don't. One of the things I really learned in terms of courageousness was to be honest and cry.
Yes.
Cry when you felt like crying.
Yeah.
You know, acknowledge how, if you feel crappy, just acknowledge it, and don't say I'm okay when you're not okay. There were times it was very not okay, you know. It was like definitely times where I just, you know, just was not coping and could not cope. But to actually say to yourself, this has got knobs on it, I don't like this, rather than, yeah, I'll be fine, mate, you know, and I'll fight this. That to me is the worst type of courage, because it's not addressing the real you inside of here, you know, and that's so important.
It's not courage, that's bravery, it's mask, it's illusion, whereas courage is truth.
Correct. And I really believe that courage is being honest with yourself. And courage is even sometimes, you know, one of the lessons I really learned through this, you know, when I was talking about the things that shaped me as a child and my self-loathing, you know, that carried through as a young adult, what I learned through this was, you got to look at the little person, the person you are inside, the I am, and love the spirit who you are. And it might feel weird, but you have to embrace yourself and say, you know, how much you have to be. And it's not narcissistic, it's about caring about you, the I am, the spirit, the whoever you are.
I
So
call
important.
it radical self-love. It's not this
Well,
bubble baths, it's radical self-love. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And that was, you know, I mean, as the grief was still very strong just recently, you know, and that's where I think I had my crises and had to write all these things and get them out, and thought, no, I've got to face all my demons. I mean, during my cancer journey, I went to the Look Good, Feel Good workshops that they offer, wonderful support. And they also have counseling support. And having a degree in psychology, I recognize when it's time that I need some help.
Yeah.
Going to a counselor is just something that is good mental health, just as you would take vitamins. You know, it's something that it's the acknowledgement that I am not coping. I need some help. I need to you know, get out there and get some help, someone, you know, from a professional, not from anybody who's got loaded emotional noise as well. You know, you go seek it from the right people. And they were wonderful, you know, and you know, this whole idea of all my spiritual and personal values was so challenged during this time, you know.
Yeah. What do you think was challenged the most?
Wow,
Big question, I know.
Well, that certainly is a big question, because I can assure you, things pale into insignificance. For me, the biggest challenge was to love myself, was to actually say, get a grip, Connie. You're okay. You know, you're okay. You're going to, the courage in terms of each, incident and each thing there was courage to venture out into the world as a musician at a mature age. There was, there's courage to undergo the chemo, or face that fear, because it is a fear and it's real. But the real courage, I guess the real courage was to actually recognize that fear and all this emotional stuff was actually being toxic to my mind, this negative self-talk, this anxiety. The anxiety is there, the fear is there, embrace it. The real courage was to actually say, to love yourself. I think that's the real courage, to get there and love yourself,
I love it. I love it. I completely agree. And my philosophy is that you've got to go through the 3 stages of self-awareness, radical self-love, and courage. And that's
Yes.
exactly what you said. You started with self-awareness and then got to the
Yes.
point where you had to love yourself
Yes.
and then have the courage
Yes.
to then go back out into life.
And actually, and this is where the courage is really, because I'm pretty well laying my demons out in public. I was very private about this. I didn't talk. I didn't, being the musician, I didn't make my my cancer story known until after the fact, because I felt, and I'm a believer that what you focus on expands, and it was like, holy dooly, I've got to focus on me and get through this first. And
Yep.
I wanted my social media to focus on my music. I did not want them to focus on me, sort of on my health issues. And I wanted the music to stand alone. Yeah, so there's that I don't know that was off on a tangent, but yeah, that was part of that self-awareness and love. But the courage was to face my demons, put them out there now publicly, in terms of, and just let them go boof, disappear,
And it's that final part of healing, to have the courage to share your story with other people so they
Yes,
can then start the process themselves.
correct. And I actually believe that. I really think it's quite cathartic, the healing part, because it's like you heal, or you might get some sort of, you've got scars. We've all got storms in our life, and we've all got scars, and we've all got this garbage that we tote around with us, right?
Yep.
And it's like, wow, now we just got to throw it away.
Yep.
Oh, now, that doesn't mean it's not going to come back next week and my garbage bin's going to fill up a bit, but, it's time to, just lay them out there and go, nah, and even with, the world state that's going on at the moment, I can see that on a global scale. Everyone's fearful, fearful, fearful. I am too. But, we have to just surrender to that and trust ourselves that we will survive this,
Yep.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think that's the key. It's facing the fear and not just burying it or hiding or ignoring it, but saying,
yep.
yes, I am scared of this thing, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
And you know what? And it's not only is it, can you say to yourself, it's okay, but you feel the fear and do it anyway. It's like, whoa, and that's a cliche, I know, but it's like,
No, I completely get it. Yep.
it's like, step out of your comfort zone. Step out of, what you think should be, because it's never going to be a should. It's just is. And one of the, I got back to, well, if you can see behind me, I've got meters of shelves of self-awareness books and things like that. But one of the things is, surrender to the situation and just, deal with the cards that are dealt. Don't have expectations of people around you and family because they will have their own issues. We have to be kind to each other, acknowledge this, whatever is going on inside of us, and say, my gosh, and then go, well, my gosh, but I'm going to try anyway, and get out there. And I think the final thing is to know that this too shall pass,
Yep.
That's always one of my favorite mottos, this too shall pass. It will pass. Whatever you're going through, good or bad, will pass,
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. That was like a little roller coaster thing going.
No, I believe the same, that we go through cycles to see if we've learnt the lesson.
Ah, yes, indeed, because
I'm
that's
seeing cycles in your story right now. Yeah.
lots of big cycles, I can assure you. Yes, and I reckon the time when when with the diagnosis, the cancer diagnosis, that was a big test of my faith,
Yeah.
huge test. And I have to share, maybe I will share with you, one of the things that I did do, I went through my anti-faith things, like, why me? And, you've deserted me and all this, but it didn't last very long. When I knew I was going in for major surgery and I knew I had this whole thing ahead of me, one of the things I did was, I have the luxury of being a musician, so I have the luxury of having recording equipment and things like that. I wrote down all my affirmations. I wrote down all my fears, and then I recorded them in my own voice. And I took some music that was in public domain because you can't get it anymore, but music that I resonated with, and made a meditation tape. And I played, and it started with my spiritual prayers and affirmations, healing affirmations, personal growth affirmations, all of these things. And I, from the time before I went in for surgery, and the first thing I said, apparently when they took me to my room, I said, "Let the healing begin," was one of the first things I said. And then basically put these headphones on, and they were on, and it was on a repeat cycle. It was on 24/7 in that first week. My doctor said to me, "I have never seen anyone recover as well as you." And I was 57 at the time.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "I have never had a patient recover as well as you." When I first, the surgery was, I had all sorts of, everybody goes through major surgery. So, people my story's not, alone. I'm not alone. But when I first because I had a bag. So basically what they do is they cut off your plumbing, basically. So you have a bag where the contents, an ileostomy is like a can't even say it now, colostomy bag. An ileostomy is like that, except that it's at the end of your ileum, which is just the small intestine. So it's emptying all the contents of your stomach into a bag, and basically you have no bowel movements, and I didn't have for 7 months because what they did was they removed my colon and then made an artificial colon out of my intestine by twisting my plumbing around and yada yada. So it had to heal, but it doesn't heal so well with chemo. So that's why the long period. So I had this bag, which was not pleasant. I can assure you, it's not pleasant. But I'm here to complain about it. So it was definitely a blessing. Yeah. And so this bag, when the nurses came in, so this bag is very important, bottom line, after your surgery. It was 5.5 hours, the surgery. Very important that everything is working okay. So that's one of the key things straight after your surgery. Well, and they have what they call stoma nurses. So it was a stoma that I had, which was my intestine was sticking out of my side, and it was into the bag. So, and it was emptying out into the bag, and this little stoma was there. And the stoma nurses came to see me the next day, and I had changed my clothes. I was not in my PJs. I had a few things sticking out of me, and they couldn't believe my color. And I'd had this tape on all night. And I also had my guitar because I believe in music. That was in my room, and I was the recovery from this sort of surgery and this sort of procedure is about 14 days in hospital. I was out just over a week, and so getting back to your faith being challenged and all your things, that was where one of my crunches was in terms of my faith. So I can, in terms of my personal growth and faith, to put this all on tape and to believe that that was going to help me heal, and it did. So there. So I guess that's my greatest, I guess.
You've been through so much, yet you can smile and you're so happy.
Well, yeah, I guess what I say to people is that what I actually say is that, people say, "How are you?" And I go, "I'm okay." No one wants to hear me if I complain anyway. So it's not about complaining. And I can assure you, I have these, as I said, these moods and all the rest. But being positive really means. So, when I say be positive, when people say, "Oh, you got to be positive," it's not about, yeah, I'll get through this. It really was about, going, what can I do to help me?
Yes.
That's being positive. What can I do? How am I going to get there? So these are all the things I did, and I would have my drinks with my husband every night, pre-dinner drinks. And then, my oncologist said to me, "Are you drinking?" And I went, "Yes." And he said, "Well, stop." Because, they do blood tests, and when you do chemo, basically they're reducing, they're killing off all your cells in your body, because your cancer cells are the weakest, and everything will grow back okay. And she said, "Well, stop it, because your liver can't handle drinking." So I stopped. You do everything for you. You got to love you and do what you have to do,
Is that how you would define courage then? That it's the courage to do what's right for you? Like, what's your definition of courage?
Well, I guess my definition, I think I wrote a whole lot of stuff, when I was trying to think about my definition. But my definition of courage is being true to you, being kind to you, loving you, being able to love you, and doing those things, being honest with you. So being honest with yourself about who you are, what you need to do. And I'm not talking about this person that's looking at you or that little camera up there. I'm talking about this person that sits behind me and is feeling all these things, and recognizing that because, and some people go, "Oh, I couldn't live with myself," right? You heard that. Well, who's the other person that you're living with, right?
Yep.
So it's like we have our presenting person and our personality that gets and tangos through life, but we have our inner spiritual person, and that's the person we need to also acknowledge, love, and nurture. And you got to nurture yourself. So that's my courage, I guess, to be able to even recognize that it needs, and do something about it to nurture.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I think that's everything up just perfectly.
Good. I'm glad it did. And I do hope by sharing this, I really do hope that this will really help someone else, because I do know those real deep moments where the depths of the lows. I really have been there, and I do know them, and I do know you can recover. I'm a living example.
Do you feel you are destined to make an impact in this world, but are struggling to find the courage to share your story? Jump over to mellys.com.au for free training, presentations and videos, or simply stay tuned for the next episode of the Courage 1000 project.